Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome back to Tekpon. Today our guest is Ken, the CEO and co-founder at Tango. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Happy to have you. Please tell us what your company does.
Yeah, so Tango, our company, allows people to create interactive walkthroughs of any software they use internally uh, uh, to effectively help their teammates up level on that software, get to know it intimately. It can be internal teammates, it could be external customers. But for us, the whole idea was how do we reduce the burden of creating documentation. So Tango allows you to create documentation in the flow of work. You just go through your process, turn the Chrome extension on. We capture everything on the back end, turn it into a beautiful step-by-step tutorial. And then when you send that to someone who needs to consume it, it'll actually walk them through it um, click by click. And so those interactive walkthroughs are really valuable, especially when you have, either broad distributed teams or a bunch of new hires where you're trying to ensure folks are either compliant or following along. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. And what do you say is the biggest problem that you solve for companies?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, and it's sort of twofold. Documentation exists within all different types of teams, all different types of companies, um, and it's the primary method of transferring knowledge. And so the
Yes.
problem with knowledge systems today is that ultimately it takes too long to create documentation around that knowledge. So we're directly solving that. And also the knowledge coverage, what we call it, or basically
Mhm.
like the percentage of knowledge that your organization uniquely has that's actually documented is really low. And it's because of that barrier. And so when we pulled some of our users, they basically said to us, hey, less than half of our company's processes or less than half of our company's knowledge is actually documented. So the outcomes that we see with customers of Tango is not just the time savings of using Tango versus using what they were doing before, but also the prevalence and the pervasiveness of knowledge being documented within their company. So they go from that low percentage to actually having their processes documented.
Yeah, it's a big change. What are the top three features of the product?
So top three features, the big things I would say, being able to document in the flow of work. All you have to do is go through your process. And so we're doing this in real time. So that automation of documentation is really key. Um, Second biggest feature, and I sort of alluded to it, but it's our guidance feature. So guidance is a way for viewers to experience a tutorial like they never have before. It's
Yeah.
actually going to walk them through click by click everything that they have to do, give them feedback in real time on what they need to do. And if something's broken, actually intelligently fill in the gaps and say, here's actually what I think that user meant for you to follow. So guidance is a big one. And then I think the third one, I'll share one that kind of applies to a bunch of different features, but we have very generous sharing and exporting. So I think last time I checked, there's probably 8 different ways that you can share or export a Tango:
Hmm.
iframes, PDFs, copy to HTML, copy to Markdown, um, copy a link, uh, and then I would also say there's all these integrations with different knowledge bases and platforms such that you can take a Tango and you can put it where your company's already looking for information. So um, that's available also on our free plan. So free users can get started and start, creating a step-by-step tutorial in Tango, put it in Confluence, put it elsewhere. I think those are the big three for us.
So you call it Tango a documentation process, or how do you use the term?
Yeah. So for us, what we say is, you know, Tango is sort of a process intelligence tool. So documentation being one component of it, but then you have the walkthrough piece, and then sort of our future state vision, which is not just documenting and walking people through it, but also starting to make inferences about what is the process that they're trying to execute against. How can we help them in their moment of need when they're actually stuck and say, hey, most people on your team, they go here next. And so that's going to be leveraging the data from capture guidance as well as artificial intelligence to help people get unstuck quickly.
What is the pricing for the product? You already said you can start for free, but
You can start for free. We have an upgraded version that allows for more customization, and that's going to be $20 per user per month, US.
mhm.
If you pay annually, you save about 20% off that price. And so that's our pro plan. You get branding, you get desktop capture, um, and just the ability to customize and edit a little bit more easily. And then our enterprise plan has a lot of sort of enterprise grade level security, SSO. You also get, sort of white glove customer support with the enterprise plan.
Okay. And I'd love to know how competitive is your space and how you differentiate from the rest.
Yeah, so I mean, the space is fairly wide open in the sense that a lot of what we're replacing with our existing customers is people using Word docs, manual screenshot capture,
Yeah.
image editors. I mean, it's very fragmented. So, our NPS is 84 because of that, because the incumbent is not really that compelling. But when we talk about competitors, a lot of what comes up sometimes is screen recording software. So Loom, Vidyard, Screencastify, they all allow you to capture what's going on in your screen. You can add voiceover. In fact,
Mhm.
Loom's great. We use Loom internally as a team, but it's good for a specific purpose.
Yes.
So, where we really differentiate is around process. And so the ability to capture process in a step-by-step way that allows people to replicate it more easily is something that video really struggles with. We heard from customers early on that, they loved what Loom would be able to give them in terms of asynchronous communication. But what they didn't love is when they got a Loom from someone and they were expected to follow it along. There's a lot of pausing, a lot of rewinding, a lot of sort of like reading between the lines, like, oh, what did they say? I don't know if I heard it correctly. And so video is a great medium, but it's not necessarily great for that like replication piece. And so, when we meet customers who say, oh, well, we use Loom, I don't know if we would use Tango and Loom, that's what we start talking about. Hey, you don't necessarily need to get rid of Loom, but think about where Loom's really effective and think about where Tango is really effective.
You put it really well. I really like it. When did you start the company?
2020. So in the middle of the pandemic.
And why did you choose to solve this problem?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, reflecting on my experience, I spent, 4.5 years at Uber, which was an incredible growth story. I mean, the way Uber grew, no company's ever grown like Uber. There's maybe some exceptions, but the story of growth was one that actually gets overlooked. It was a story of decentralized growth. We had to go launch every single market that we entered, and it was starting from scratch in every market. And obviously you had some brand awareness and people had used it in other cities, but we were talking about hiring a team from scratch, onboarding drivers from scratch, promoting to riders that maybe hadn't used us or had used a competitor like Lyft. And so with that, we had to playbook a lot of what made other markets successful. We were coming up with tactics, metrics, how we validated that those were like the best practice. And so little did I know, but like in that moment, I was getting a best in class education in documentation and how documentation can scale a company. And so, I took a lot of inspiration from that and applied it to Tango, where, we said documentation, not every company is going to be like Uber. A lot of companies face a lot of uphill battles when it comes to documentation. So how do we actually take some of those insights and build a product that's going to address, the majority of companies that struggle immensely with sharing knowledge via documentation?
Thank you for sharing. How big is the overall team right now?
Team right now is 41. So, we've grown. I mean, I would say we were probably about half that size about a year ago. And so, with the continued growth in the business, the teams continue to grow as well too. And so everybody's remote, fully distributed. We have people all over the U.S., but also in the Netherlands, Spain, Brazil, Australia. It's a pretty special group.
That's awesome. I'm happy for you. And have you raised any funding?
We've raised about 20 million total in venture funding. So we did our seed round in the fall of 2020, just when we were getting started. the purpose of that money, obviously, go out, build a team, and go build the product you're talking about.
Mhm.
And then we raised a $14 million Series A last April. And so, when you look at Series A, you've probably achieved some level of product market fit. And so that money should be used to kind of start scaling the company and scaling different functions. And so, from there, we built out our marketing function, we built out our sales team. And that's what's allowed us to continue to grow in the way that we have.
Congratulations. What is your biggest challenge since 2020?
Oh man. Well, every day is a new challenge. I think one thing that we continue to come back to is, and this has to be in the DNA of any startup, is like almost like how do we disrupt ourselves? Like what's like the next version of Tango that's actually going to be better than Tango? And so, I think one challenge you always have as a startup, especially when you have traction like we've had, and you've had team growth, you've had user growth, you've had positive momentum, is you start to feel almost like this inertia of like, oh, we got to like keep doing what we're doing, right? It's working. Keep doing it. And so, it actually sort of bucks the mindset that you have as an entrepreneur, which is let's do something nobody's ever done. Or let's do something I've never done. Let's like introduce something new to market. And so you always have to kind of balance this inertia of your business with, how do we continue to stay innovative? How do we continue to stay not just steps ahead of competitors, but like we got to stay steps ahead of ourselves too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing. And how about the biggest mistake?
Biggest mistake, I would say, one thing we probably underappreciated a little bit was how many teams were going to be using Tango. When we launched the product, it was largely a single player product. You could go in, you could create documentation.
Mhm.
That was kind of it. And you could put that documentation any which way. We still had a lot of those sharing methods I talked about.
Mhm.
But we underestimated how many teams would want to be on Tango, meaning, having functionality at a workspace level, having foldering, having permissions, having different structures that a lot of different tools have and people were familiar with. So it took us almost a year to build that into the product. And it was, users were clamoring for it because they were like, oh, I want to invite my team member, but like, how do I do that? And we'd be like, well, they can go sign up for an account too. But the level of like collaboration that people desired was a lot higher than I think we'd assumed. So, if I were to go back to square one, I probably would have said, when we launch, let's make sure we have team functionality. Let's make sure it's not just a single player product as it was when we did launch.
I appreciate the transparency. Now I'd love to know how you found your first customers.
So we actually had pilots well before we launched. So we launched in September of 2021. We did that on Product Hunt. That was a great medium for us. I would recommend any entrepreneur, small team launch their product on Product Hunt. It's not going to change the trajectory of your business, but you're going to get a lot of really valuable feedback. And so we did that in September of 2021. But before that, we were piloting with a bunch of different customers. And those pilots were secured mainly from like working our network, whether it was investor introductions, whether it was people from our past careers who ended up, moving to new companies and wanting to try out the product. And so all of our pilots were free. We didn't charge anybody. We didn't, we didn't set any usage limits. We didn't have pricing plans. We really just wanted feedback on how they were going to use it. So, a lot of it was just getting the product in people's hands, having them react to it live, having them, go off on their own and then figure some things out and how they might use it, talking to us about those use cases. And so, I think one difficulty in pilots always is like, how do you make sure you're getting good feedback? And what I mean by that is there's this analogy that, I forget her name, but she's like a great marketer. She talks about, which is don't serve your users burnt pizza. And so the idea is like, I can burn any pizza and I'm going to give it to you. And your feedback is going to be, oh, it's burnt. Doesn't really taste that good. But, if it wasn't burnt, those could be two totally different pizzas. And you'd have very different feedback. You might love one, you might hate the other. And so, what you always have to keep in mind is like, don't serve your users burnt pizza because you're not going to get good feedback. And so making sure that our product was not burnt pizza, making sure it was at a minimum level where people could interact with it, they could see what it could do, they could give us real feedback, was really important. Because I think that first pilot, we gave them something, it was buggy, wasn't working always like super reliably. And so what ended up happening was all the feedback was, well, I ran into all these issues, but like I actually wasn't able to test it for the use cases you wanted me to test it to. And that basically means you have to go back to square one. So with those pilots, you have to make sure that your product is ready to some extent.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the advice. I really appreciate it. And what was the most successful go-to-market strategy for getting new customers?
So we're a bottoms-up product-led growth company. So users typically find us and download the Chrome extension. But one way that we've been able to capture users' attention is actually through short-form video. So TikTok was sort of the first area that we had a lot of success. That success has sort of spilled over onto YouTube as well as Instagram Reels. We have a product where showing and telling are two very different things. When we show the product, people get it and they love it and they really want to go try it. Versus, I could sit here today on a podcast and explain what it is we do, and people will either not necessarily believe it, or they might be a little bit confused, like, well, it's doing what? Like, it's creating what in the flow of what? And so, showing the product, it always has had much more success in terms of converting people into users. And so, that's a go-to-market motion that I don't think any of us would have predicted, is using influencers and using social media in that way.
And it works for B2B users?
It works for B2B, yeah. There's a lot of different communities on these platforms where people are finding solutions to, their day-to-day problems. And people forget, most of your day is spent usually working, right? So your day-to-day problems tend to overwhelmingly be about work and productivity. So it's been a great medium for us.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And now more on the future side. What is the vision for the company for the upcoming years?
Yeah. So the analogy that we like to use is we want to become the Waze app for work. And so when you think about it in that way, there's all these different systems and tools that you have to navigate. Very similar to a map, you have to navigate. But sometimes the best routes, the best ways to navigate those tools come from, frontline workers. They don't necessarily come from the tools themselves. It's usually someone's, hey, figured out a way to do this. And, that knowledge across a bunch of employees, a bunch of people in similar roles might actually help you navigate something more easily. So for us, that sort of like crowdsourced knowledge about process and tools and systems is largely going to inform an application that's going to look very different years down the road. Instead of going to Tango and saying, I wonder if someone's created a workflow on how to use, this feature in Typeform. Instead, you'll go to Typeform, we'll know where you are. You'll enter a prompt that says, hey, I want to be able to go do this. And we'll actually walk you through it. We might automate some of it because we have a high level of confidence in what you need to do. But ultimately, we're going to help you get to those moments of human judgment. We'll know what those moments are. And, you'll have to, basically intervene there. But all the stuff that is mindless and just requires this like nuanced understanding of a tool, that should go away over time.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear how you started your career, basically, after college.
Yeah. So after college, I went into Deloitte Consulting, based out of New York. Consulting was very appealing to me coming out of college because I felt like it kept a lot of doors open. You could work across industries, you could work across functions, different types of clients, which is very true. I had probably like 4 unique experiences in the year that I spent at Deloitte, but it was at that time that I got an opportunity to join Uber. And Uber in 2014 absolutely had product market fit. It was very clear that the company was on an upward trajectory, but it hadn't really yet scaled. And so, when I contrasted those experiences, I kind of said, okay, Deloitte's, been great. I've learned a lot, but what's hard is you're always delivering solutions to a client that you never see the end result from.
Mm.
So I said, okay, I want to go work at a company, one that's growing, one that's scaling, one that has really smart people. Uber fit that bill. And once I got there, it was sort of like, off to the races. I mean, it was crazy growth, crazy smart people, so much learning all the time. And the culture was very entrepreneurial in the sense that even when we were thousands of people, if you found a big enough opportunity or big enough problem within the company, you could organize a team around it and go after it. And that's really what entrepreneurship is. You find a big enough opportunity or a big enough problem to solve, organize a team around it. And so, from my experience at Uber, I knew that I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. And so, everything after Uber was geared towards that. I went to an incubator where I was a founder in residence. I ultimately left that because I got admitted into Harvard Business School. Before going to Harvard Business School, I went and worked for a founder, thinking through the problems that he was experiencing with his business and like trying to help him think through it. And then when I got to Harvard Business School, that's where I met my co-founders for Tango. So Uber is sort of the central node of that entire career journey because that's where I was inspired to become an entrepreneur, and that informed everything else that I tried to do.
That's a fantastic story. And how many years did you spend at Uber, and what was your position?
About 4.5 years. I held 3 or 4 different roles, I want to say. Started off on the launch team, helping new cities get started and think through their business. I eventually went over to our marketplace team, and marketplace was a product team. Built everything that users don't see about Uber: routing, matching, pricing. Really, really fascinating stuff. That was definitely like the smartest group of people that I've ever worked with. A lot of them worked at Uber, but were on leave from university where they were professors talking about different optimization problems. I mean, it was really fascinating. And then the last team I was on was product strategy. So we were working directly with Chief Product Officer Manik Gupta, as well as the Chief Technology Officer Tuan Pham, to kind of execute some of their like higher level initiatives. And so that was the last team that I was on.
Awesome. So we have 5 minutes left. I have two questions, 2 quick questions. Firstly, what would be your best piece of advice for a starting founder?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and honestly, this one was hard for me too. So this is not something that I necessarily embraced when I started, but just admitting what you don't know. I think a lot of times as a founder, you feel this intense obligation to like figure something out on your own all the time, and make sure that you have the answers so that when someone asks, you can provide an update. But I think what's made us successful as a founding team, and we're lucky that there's 3 of us, but if we encounter something where we're like, we don't know how to do this, like we don't know how to solve this type of issue, or we've never done XYZ function before, we've always leaned on our network to go figure that out and help. I mean, you take a problem solving mindset to it, but you find other people that have done it before. And so, that sort of honest self-reflection, I think, helps you solve problems faster instead of you thinking, oh, I'm the founder, so I need to go solve this. That's really not the case most times.
Absolutely. And the last question, what's your favorite SaaS product that you use apart from Tango?
Oh, man. So, I don't think this one's any secret, but, in terms of running a business, Rippling is amazing. I mean, we have our entire team's payroll on Rippling. We manage our benefits, 401k, hiring process, forms through Rippling. It has the ability to basically integrate with anything your team uses. I mean, we have it such that you can sign an offer letter through Rippling. That'll immediately transition you to onboarding that employee into your payroll system, which is run by Rippling. And then within your first week, Rippling will automatically trigger a a swag box to get sent to that person. And those are typically like 3 distinct apps that you would use as a business,
Yes.
but Rippling brings it all together. And so I'm a huge Rippling fan. It's a multi-billion-dollar company at this point, but that's the one that I feel like couldn't really live without.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining the podcast. You did great. I'm super grateful.
Great. Thank you for having me.